and welcome to Radiodays Europe 2022. We're celebrating radio, we're celebrating audio, and we're celebrating podcasts. We're here informing you, we're here to help you celebrate and inspire you as well, and this session is no different. We're going to be talking about audio streaming success. To tell you more, and then to walk in front of, I'm going to hand you over to Martin Liss.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Cheers, thanks a million. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the most interesting panel and session on Radiodays Europe 2022. You've made the right choice coming to track 4.
No pressure.
Not at all. And if you heard me this morning, you probably heard some familiar words. Anyway. It's good to have you all. It's a very interesting and intriguing cooperation we'll be talking about, something that is a bit unusual for the European market thus far, but quite interesting all the same. On the panel with me, it'll be actually be interesting because there's 3 German guys sitting up here speaking English to you. So if you think this is odd, we certainly do. So right next to me is Stefan Zilch. He is the General Manager of TuneIn in Germany. And next to him is Christoph Falke. He's the General Manager of Axel Springer Audio in Germany. These two have teamed up to do a one-of-a-kind cooperation at this point for this market at least. And they're going to tell us all about it straight away. Could you please introduce yourselves quite a bit, give us a bit of your background and what you're doing at TuneIn, Stefan?
Yes, happy to do that. Thank you all for coming. So it's great to see you here and be live with people again. So it has been some time. So I joined TuneIn just a couple of months ago in October last year. And I have worked for digital content platforms for a long time. Being the first managing director for Spotify in Germany, also worked with Acast and podcasts. I'm not a radio guy. I'm more of an audio platform, digital content guy. But obviously, I'm learning a lot about it, and I'm really happy to be here.
Christoph?
Yeah. So I'm Christoph. I'm working for Axel Springer since almost 15 years now. And I'm responsible basically for 3 pillars. One is we have a centralized audio unit to push audio business forward. And second is that we are responsible for the portfolio management. So we hold shares in over 30 different companies. So that's a bunch of classical radio stations, but also premium podcast production companies or digital web radio platforms. And the third pillar is we're also producing podcasts ourselves because I'm convinced that's totally helpful to understand in detail what you're doing, especially when you partner with the editorial department.
Absolutely. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with particularly the German market, Axel Springer is the biggest, I believe, company in editorial and media when it comes to electronic media, probably together with Bertelsmann RTL. We had Christoph at Radiodays last year when we spoke about change management, because it used to be a print company. Now it's a very much electronic media company, which is an interesting topic in itself. But today we are here to announce or unveil or explain a cooperation between your 2 companies. A little bit has been heard last week, but you're going to tell us a bit more about that. So what was the idea and what are you up to? What are you doing, Stefan?
I'm first.
Yes.
So the idea was, as I just said, I started working at TuneIn in October, and I do have a history in music and also sports content and so on. One thing I was not aware of how big news is as a category and as a genre. So TuneIn in the US has been really successful in bringing really popular news brands into the audio world, such as CNN, MSNBC, Bloomberg, Fox News, also ESPN for sports content. So they have done a lot of these corporations in the US, and they're working out really, really well. And that was the first time where I thought, like, okay, why don't we do this over here? So that was the starting point.
Yeah. I mean, from our view, it is really a great partnership because, I mean, basically it's about we are bringing our TV programs of Bild and Welt to different channels as live audio streams free of charge to the TuneIn platform. And for us, it's great news. Why that? Because we are convinced that we have now the chance to address new listeners to our news brands and also capture these interstitial moments in the car, in the kitchen. So we have a way better distribution. And so we also have seen the success of TuneIn in the US. And therefore, for us, it was really helpful. And funny side fact, I remember our first talks was in October on Radiodays in Lisbon. So thank you, Radiodays, for making that happen.
We're happy to help wherever we can. So to be clear, there are two brands that Axel Springer is doing. One is called Bild and one is called Welt. Bild is the classic tabloid brand of the house. Welt is a, I would say, quality journalism, probably a bit conservative newspaper brand. And those two have TV outlets as well.
Yeah.
And now the thing is that you can listen to the TV program through TuneIn. Is that getting it right?
Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely. And I like your description of Bild.
You like my description? Well, let's say I worked on that.
Okay.
But why do you do that? I mean, why is it attractive to stream television without the pictures, if I may ask it that way?
Yeah, I mean, because there are different use cases. And what I like most is the fact that, I mean, especially the morning is probably the most structured part of the day. And if you have children, for example, you're always in a hurry and you never are able to finish things. And then if you're, for example, watching a TV news show, and then you have to hurry, jump in your car, and then you simply turn on the TuneIn app, choose Welt Live, and then you're switching from watching to listening, and you're still connected with the content, with the brand. And this, I like really this smart bridging moment, and TuneIn makes it possible for us because now, back in the past, we have had two blank spots. That was the moment when the people sit in the car, drive to the office, and the other way around if they're driving home. So, and therefore, we are really filling the gap here. But among other things, because, I mean, as you know, TuneIn is available of over 200 devices.
Yeah.
It really helps us.
Yeah. Where is the interesting angle for TuneIn when it comes to that?
So, as I said in the beginning, I'm more of a platform person, so I don't make a difference. Quite like personally, I don't make a difference between TV, radio, online, what is digital video, and so on. I believe media brands need to, reach their users on every single platform. They need to produce content for every single platform. And whether these are like, I don't know, up and coming social channels, like, I don't know, Twitch, and there's so much going on, obviously also in the social media world. I do believe that media brands need to reach out to their customers and produce content for these various different occasions and situations, what you just mentioned, like driving in a car or just, people, just, interacting with their smart speaker and so on. So I believe that in probably even now, but in a couple of years, there will no be such thing as this is a newspaper company, this is a radio company, and this is like a video company, or what is a podcast company? That now they're doing video podcasts, or a podcast could be an audiobook. Like it doesn't. This whole kind of silo thinking doesn't make sense to me. And I believe we are, as TuneIn, we're this kind of audio extension. Because we built the distribution into over 200 channels, what we just mentioned, into the cars and all these different devices and speakers, even golf carts, I have heard. I'm not a golf player, but I've heard like these tiny white little cars that people drive over their golf court. TuneIn is even integrated into that one. So that's our part of the whole strategy. We can't take care of other stuff or video or that, but I do believe we are just like an audio extension, and quite frankly, there's no costs. So there's like a bit of streaming, technical stream formatting, whatever. Otherwise, it's just another part of the value chain that you can address. You can you can build incremental reach, build incremental revenues. I don't even see a downside of it. It's just upside.
Yeah. Why do you think, Christoph, that media companies need to invest in an audio strategy for that in order to stay successful?
I mean, without a strategy, you are unable to focus. And probably one of the most important parts of strategy is to decide what you don't want to do. So, I mean, to give you an example, we have Axel Springer have established this team audio almost 1 year ago and decided, okay, we want to be #1 in audio journalism in the German-speaking countries until 2025. So, of course, this is a bold mission. And a lot of people say, hey, okay, you're Axel Springer, you can do that. But we also talked to a couple of other regional newspapers, for example, and they have a completely different game plan because they try to, with audio products, they try to push their paid conversion into their paid offerings. So they're completely different angles, and I think it's extremely helpful to have clear path for this growing market. And so therefore, I'm totally convinced that's really crucial to have fun, because at the end of the day, no publisher can afford to ignore this rise of the spoken word. And if you do that, at the end, I assume you are not the lucky one, because basically we see, or just to give you a few points why we think it is really crucial. First one, we have done an analysis of the German podcast landscape and figured out that almost half of the monthly reach from the podcast comes from journalistic content. So the demand is there. Then we figured out that the retention rate of our audio users on our platforms is way higher than the retention rate from a traditional reader. So audio integration, smart audio integration into product is really a key feature. And then we have this monetization layer, which is really promising because we are able to gain 100 euro plus net CPMs. And the last thing is, I personally think that with the rise of voice control, your smartphone will stay in the pocket more often. So audio will be a really dominant mobile advertising channel. And taking this all into account, I think it's you have to train your audio muscle right now, because otherwise you really get in serious troubles, and therefore you need a strategy.
Yeah. If I'm looking into the audience and not to these two gentlemen, that's not because I don't like them, it's because I need to see whether there are hands up and if somebody wants to ask a question. So if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll be coming around with a microphone. There you are already. There's a gentleman right up front here, Rosie. No rush, but he's waiting. If you could please say who you are, where you're coming from, and then ask your question, please.
Nicolas from Ma Radio in Belgium. I have a question for TuneIn. TuneIn, as far as I know, is not a non-for-profit company, so you said that the service is totally free. So what's your business model, especially in this deal? Do you sell your service to golf cart company and manufacturer, or do you do?
For this, it's advertising. So in this partnership, we have obviously advertising that will run before the stream and in the stream, and we're both when we negotiate a revenue share, and that's pretty much it. And there's some, as I said before, some technical costs with it, but these are rather minimal. So it's all about advertising for this. So in the US we have, with some of these news partnerships that I mentioned, there's also a paid model where it's all commercial free. If you want to get rid of the ads, you can pay for that. And then also we share these revenues with the content creators and with the partners. But in Germany, we start just with an ad model and want to build up reach. And obviously, it's also a first for us. So we just launched last Thursday. So the work isn't done; it's just finished. It's just started.
There's a gentleman in row 4, I believe it is.
Maybe I can add one point, because
of course.
Our view on that is really that the most important task is now to gain traction, to promote this thing, and to tell it to the listener there's really something new. So for us, it's reach first, and then, of course, monetization will come, I'm pretty sure. But it's really about promote this new idea of a live audio stream.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that clearly at some point you've talked about what do we do with the money coming in. I mean, it's a professional question that's totally fair to ask. But it's also fair to say, let's not worry about this at the very beginning, but let's see where we go and
exactly.
and so to speak, separate the bits when we have it, right? Yes, please, sir.
Hi, my name's Tom, I'm from the BBC. I just had a question, I guess it's for both of you, but largely for Stefan. Just on what you were saying, Stefan, around you think in 10 years' time that kind of the distinctions between content as we have them at the moment are going to fall, and we're not going to distinguish between things as strongly as we do now. I just think, do you think there is any argument to say, you know, there are certain techniques you employ when you're making a podcast that are specific to a podcast, and there are some that are specific to TV that make those different sort of formats in their own right really work? And if you dissolve all of those distinctions, do you end up with kind of a lot of content that's quite average but doesn't serve any of those particular platforms quite well, or are there cleverer ways to serve all those different platforms?
That's a very good question. I do believe that every content and every content format has a certain meaning. So if you talk about a podcast, the podcast is obviously always, it's never going to have the reach of radio. It's always, you know, I wouldn't call it niche, but it's always just, you know, a fraction of that reach, but it's in depth. So people are going, you know, they're interested in one certain topic, so they want to listen for 1 full hour about, like, let's say I'm a big basketball fan, so there's currently, you know, NBA playoffs, so I'm listening to hours of basketball podcasts because they do all these analyses. That stuff I could never listen or watch because that would just be like a short, you know, short form content. And even when I look at TuneIn, I can even in the audio section, if we just look at audio, I can see the different use cases for different genres. So what I wasn't aware of, like how powerful live news is and breaking news is. So when I started, I learned that the biggest day for TuneIn in terms of listening and engagement was in 2021 was the 6th of January. Do people know what happened then? So it was when people stormed the White House. And that is a very good example of when we talk about ubiquity and staying connected through all these devices, because that's, you know, the biggest event for TuneIn wasn't the Super Bowl, which was also broadcasted, or, you know, you could listen to it live on TuneIn, but that was planned. So people, you know, they invite friends and then they watch it obviously on the television. That's, you know, even, you know, if you're you know, driving or something, you can't access the content, you might listen to it, but, you know, if you're a football fan, you prefer to watch this live. However, with the 6th of January, so obviously there were, you know, crazy people storming the White House in the US, and people got really concerned. And it was an event that I think that went on through the whole day. So we could see how they were, like what you mentioned, these kind of intersections, but they would probably pick it up on the television, but at some point they have to leave the house or be somewhere where they couldn't look at a screen. So then they would switch to other devices, listen to it throughout the day, then listen to it in their car, and then probably come back and switch the telly back on to understand what's been going on there. And that being the biggest day, that tells, you know, how strong news is, how strong radio/audio is, and that we have to build for this kind of connected world so people can stay in touch with topics that, you know, have them engaged, whether it's a negative one or a positive one, or, you know, like this crazy day. But that's probably the biggest learning out of like when I just look at stats, is like you have to provide the content that matters most in every single part of your, you know, daytime or in your journey. So and that's you know, that doesn't mean that, oh, you don't need TV or you don't need a podcast. You need every single one of these, but each and every one for their purpose.
Christoph, if a company like Axel Springer decides to open the audio side of 2 TV stations into TuneIn, that's something like a new channel, I would say. You know, it's outside of radio, it's kind of outside of podcasting as well. It's a new channel of distribution. Why do you think should media companies have a multi-channel strategy in their audio strategy?
I mean, this has to do with the thing mentioned before, different use cases. Because we see, I mean, you have so many different use cases, and this is the challenge also, to create this special audio experience that really fits to the moments. So it could be live audio stream. It could be classical radio stream. It could be also a podcast, but podcast for us is at the end of the day only a means of distribution. What Stefan mentioned before, it could be audiobooks, or it could be in the future, I don't know, audio games for backseat entertainment of kids. So there are tons of possibilities, and so I think this is what we really have to achieve, because for example, one of our major goals now is to explore new distribution possibilities. I mean, TuneIn is a great example how you can do that. Another one is we also have produced a podcast directly from a TV show of Bild, which is called Reif is Live, which is a soccer show. And we realized, okay, we simply take this audio signal, live audio, and it really worked well. So that means these switching from watching to listening is something which really works well. And this was also something that really makes us clear, okay, let's try to join forces here. And yeah, I think that's the main reason, because we have to serve all these different use cases with different audit products.
Yeah. And maybe let me, if I can add one thing, and I've worked for so many years in digital content. I just had a chat with some older colleagues and friends. When I was at T-Online, which was the largest portal in Germany in the old days of the internet, we experimented with something called a personalized start page in 2002. Where people, that was so early, and people could say like, oh, I want more sports content, or I want more, finance content, stock market, and this and that, and this never worked because it's just too much to ask, and the users are, I wouldn't say lazy, but they don't have time to to mess with all that stuff, and oh, I'm getting this here, and I'm getting this there, and then they need the content brought to them in the right format, which requires as little work and effort as possible. And when you do that, I think you're quite successful. And the largest platforms for content in every media, they do that very well. And I think, again, like audio is one part, but you need to bring it to them in a seamless, ubiquitous way. And what we see, for example, smart speakers are growing like hell. So that's one. Like, I have friends. Their 8-year-old kids teach their parents how to use their smart speaker.
Yeah, I know that from somewhere. Caroline had a question.
Yeah, hi. I'm Caroline from Radio Player, but you guys know me. I'm just wondering, you were mentioning the revenue share deal you made. I would expect Axel Springer also to be interested in some insights. So what kind of data are you sharing?
I mean, basically, the only thing I can say, I don't want to start with discussing all the details, but we have clearance from our legal department, which is really something outstanding. It's not so easy, so be sure from the data side, we are really on the safe side.
But we do share data with partners. So every partner, they have an access to a data tool that we use, so they can see, I wouldn't call it live, but at least it's all updated per day, like the session starts, listening hours, obviously like different devices. So that is something that we share with contractual partners, not just also on the radio side.
All right, thanks.
The ubiquity that you spoke about earlier, Stefan, about it being less and less important whether you listen or you hear, or whether it's a podcast or live radio or whatever, that seems to be something like a meta topic in the future, don't you think? To be every time, everywhere, and that's something that TuneIn really promotes, doesn't it?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's obviously in radio that's a hot topic. It's the ubiquity strategy, like let's go everywhere to pick up users and multi-platform, and we've mentioned all these buzzwords. Or is it the walled garden? I want everything in my own house, and everyone needs to come to me. Obviously, if I was a managing director of a radio station, I would love the idea that every user will come to me, download my app, and engage with my content all day long. But we've learned that this is not how the real world
Normal
lives.
people don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to open up, and even my CEO Rich, he said it on stage in Lisbon, and he had a very good example, and I was part of that, to be honest. When I was at Spotify, everything changed when music opened up. Music was losing so much money, and if you now see, like, music is distributed everywhere, so whenever there's a competition, there are all these platforms, obviously, fighting for interest and engagement and so on. That's a good thing for the industry. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And that's what you see with music now, and what the value is. And now, Universal Music is going public and being worth gazillions of dollars. And you can even, I would even argue, I can see it in Germany in the TV landscape. Like all these, I would think, like fierce competitors, they're all joining each other, and you can subscribe to the television through Sky and vice versa, and then you can subscribe to DAZN on Amazon and vice versa. So I don't even get it. Like everyone seems to be cooperating with everyone, even though they're fierce competitors. But it makes sense because you want to be, again, ubiquitous, and you want to have your content distributed everywhere. And I think, and that's the whole, that's the whole story. Is it like, do we, build a walled garden around something and expect every user to come to me, or do we think like open up and fish where the fish are? And that's a strategy question that I cannot answer for every media company. We believe in a really open space.
Yeah, and I mean, Rich made that clear on the stage in Lisbon that he said, try everything and see what works best. You are a media company. You hold shares in classic radio. You do pretty amazing stuff on the audio sector, Christoph. So, what's your approach towards this walled garden versus ubiquity? Because there are some attractive aspects in the walled garden as well.
Yeah, but to be honest, I think on the long run, walled garden approach wasn't successful so much. So it definitely makes way more sense to join forces in general. And I understand that, let's say 20 years ago, distribution life or ubiquity life was pretty easy because ubiquity could have been the nickname of radio. So it was so easy. There was no digital competition, only a few channels. You can control the FM channel, everything was nice. But this situation reminds me a little bit also at the early days of the traditional publishers. Pretty much the same.
Yes.
And then the new digital publisher came up and they started not only to monetize their own reach, they only started to monetize their distributed reach. Like Insider or Media Pioneer in Germany doing pretty well. So coming back to radio, I assume in 2 or 3 years from now, FM distribution won't be the dominant distribution channel anymore. That means for the first time, especially in Germany in history, the majority of listeners is reached via digital channels.
I can already see this headline.
Yeah,
Christoph Falke says
no, but
FM is dead.
it's not about headline. It's about a fact. It's simply about look into the stats.
Yeah.
So what will happen? Because the digital competition is only one click away, and so I assume that let's say the pieces of the cake probably would rearrange a little bit. I have no clear view of how big the cake will be, and the way it's becoming more complex. And having this in mind, for example, also TuneIn could really help here. And this is not an ad slot from my side, because I'm convinced that let's say, to be honest, a normal or a regional radio station is simply not able to, or simply cannot afford to have a dedicated distribution management for every single product, for every single channel. It's really a challenge. And to have a partner here who brings me to 200 different devices is really helpful. And the other thing is, as a single player, you simply haven't the bargaining power to meet the big platforms as equals. I mean, most of us, at the end of the day, you have Amazon, Meta, and Alphabet. So compared, if you take their combined market cap, it's pretty much the same than the GDP of Germany. So compared to them, we are all more or less chip shops. But at the end of the day, it's only about joining forces to secure ubiquity. And for us, for example, TuneIn is a great example. We recently integrated podcasts into linear radio streams. We have a cooperation agreement with a service provider for hospitals to bring podcasts to also to this target group.
A lot of people who have time to listen.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
So but this, I mean, take it the other way around. There's so much opportunities here to reach listeners in new use cases, and that I'm totally convinced that on the long run, it's totally crucial and helpful to develop a sustainable business.
Does that mean that competition becomes bigger for your classic radio stations as well? Because at the end of the day, the market becomes more international. Everything is available just one click away. If I don't want to hear the news from Berlin, I can hear the news from Zimbabwe if I want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, there is already, let's say, a new phase we have now, because historically in Germany we have a lot of regional frequencies, regional radio stations. Now we have DAB+, which offers us also to have stations with nationwide reach. This is a new thing. But on the long run, you definitely have to take this broader perspective and you don't have to say, okay, I'm a radio company. From my point of view, you're an audio company. Let's call audio entertainment company, but to distinguish between, okay, now I'm doing radio, now I'm doing podcast, now I'm doing blah, 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 I don't care. At the end of the day, it's audio for listeners in different situations.
Yeah. Stefan, why do you think that international is somewhat like the new battleground for any sort of streaming audio, or is it?
It's a very good question, and I wouldn't say it has to be all international. I mean, the gentleman from the BBC who asked the question, I was, the different strengths and the different, of the different media types. So I would, still argue that radio is the closest, the most local, regional, along with local newspapers. However, if they exist, but it's a very close media type, and that's something that. Quite frankly, also Spotify hasn't been able to rival. So otherwise, I've been here all day, and there was Spotify was mentioned in almost every keynote. But we're in Sweden here. That's where it all started. So if that was so big, there wouldn't be any more radio here, because I know how many Swedes have a Spotify account. So every media have their strength, and the strength of radio is this kind of close proximity and these regional aspects. Certainly in Germany, where we have a completely regionalized radio landscape, the international part, I believe, is more on our side, is more on the platform side, because and that's with a company like Axel Springer, similar. At some point, all media companies will be tech companies. Mm-hmm. They will be it's and you see it now even with German publishing companies. They have to become tech companies in a way, and they have to have this expertise. And you see so many of them, building their own podcast players and their own different players and models. And you have to think internationally, because everything that you invest has to scale. And if you only have a tiny market, that's what you just mentioned, like a small local radio station cannot build, a distribution strategy for 200 devices, because, the market is too small for this to scale. So then if you, have an international strategy, or you're able to expand your content and get, incremental reach, you have a bigger scale of the content to monetize, obviously, and because you have to become a tech company.
But if you're a regional radio station, is that even necessary? If I am a regional radio station for, say, the south of Italy, why would I care to be distributed worldwide or on multiple?
Oh, no, you don't have to. I'm not saying that. That's why I meant, if this is more our question for TuneIn.
Okay.
Because we obviously, I'm the first employee, not the first, but one of the first employees outside of the US. So for the platforms, for the tech companies, they have to be international, because otherwise, if we were only operating in the US, it wouldn't make sense, or if we only operate in Germany or Europe, it wouldn't make sense. So it's really for us to have this international strategy, which we're now doing, and I know that, we have neglected this market for a long time.
Yeah. So if you look into this year and into next year, what do you think? Where will audio streaming or the audio sector in general? Where will that head? Where will that go? What does the future look like? What do you think, Christoph?
Well, in general, what we see from all the stats we know is that especially the non-linear audio streaming is grown about 30% year over year, and will do also in the future. And we see a tremendous increase in podcasting, especially in Germany. But I think in general, this let's say streaming distribution will grow year over year, because it's a natural process that this will grow, because you have so many new opportunities to develop new products if you are, let's say, IP-based distributed, because you can interact with the user, you can do a lot of stuff which you can't do when you have, let's say, analog or traditional radio streaming. So this is therefore I'm pretty optimistic regarding on the one hand, also the future of radio, especially in Germany, because what you've mentioned, we have this language barrier in Germany, which is tremendously high, to be honest, because even the international movies are dubbed in Germany. That shows how important it is also to have this local speech. And we have also a lot of different dialects in every region. So, and if you want to have a close relationship to the listener, you need a host that is really close with the people. So this is something I think this is really crucial for a successful radio, and we are totally convinced that this will remain a pretty much successful business also over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So, but in general, of course, it will be a growing market, because what we see is that the demand of spoken word is increasingly dramatically. And my personal perspective is probably it also has to do that we have done, let's say, very music-driven radio in the past, and maybe we forgot from time to time that it's helpful to also to have these longer news parts, longer spoken word parts, which are really crucial to connect with the people.
Stefan, I have a notion what your answer will be like, but I'm going to ask anyway. As you're from TuneIn, where do you think is the streaming audio sector heading in the next year or two?
Oh, in the next year or two, there's not going to be a huge difference. I think we will see more genres going into audio. So we will, like with news, with sports, and so on. So there's that's also something I learned from the US. There's a fantastic sports content there. Obviously, they have more sports leagues and all the college sports. So I think a lot of that will be adapted. So for many sports, there are not even any audio rights that you can purchase, or there's no produced content. However, in general and more like strategic and maybe like let's say 5 years. Okay, is my mic still working? Yeah. I think in 5 years, it's more about. I think there will be live audio, conversational live audio, and there will be on-demand audio. And these these different boxes or whatever we're trying to put it into now, with like this is a podcast and this is a even now I don't understand the difference. And you could argue in Germany is a huge market for spoken word content with very large publishing companies. We have these so-called Hörspiele, which are like audio plays, which go back to cassette tapes in the 80s with really, really popular brands. And I don't see why we call this one thing and this the other. I think we're just in a transition phase. No one's going to say colored TV anymore because every TV is colored. And I think at some point we will be really talking about live audio and on-demand audio. And whether that's a podcast that is delivered via an RSS feed that you download, or whether that's streamed, or whether that doesn't really matter. We're trying, at the moment, we're still in this phase of putting technical names to different media distribution formats, which isn't really how the user's thinking. So
it's probably an adaptation strategy. When you learn something new, you just take the old stuff and redescribe it. So like a CD is like a record, but it only works on one side.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that. Well, congratulations again on the cooperation. It's interesting where this will go. Please give a big hand to Christoph Falke from Axel Springer Audio and Stefan Zilch from TuneIn. Thank you all. I think we've seen how important Ubiquity is and how important it is to be distributed, no matter what you call it, podcast, radio, audio, or anything else. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In this room, in about 5 or 10 minutes, they're going to be discussing different business models in podcasting. So stick around if you like, but yeah, it's going to be in about 10 minutes' time. Thank you.